Friends, welcome to Abir. This is a special conversation. We have Rekha Rodwittiya with us, and I was reading about her, and she has amazing number of adjectives about her. She's a feminist, and she is a painter. And I have read what she wrote. So she has amazing facility with languages, which sometimes we find that artists like they paint because they're not saying those many things in sentences. So welcome Rekha ji, and welcome to Abir Pothi.
Thank you so much for having me.
We would like to start with a basic, question, which is about a process from an idea to a form where we come up with an output of an art or painting, and how do you go about it? I mean, if you can tell me, like in a step by step or whichever way, how the work kind of finds its configure and form.
I think that one would have to sort of accept and understand that artists are people who have territories of interest and engagement, and therefore I think it's not just that we go from one work to another in separation and isolation, Nidishji. What we do is actually we are kind of sort of interlocuting with an outside world in many ways, filtering and absorbing, and perhaps in some ways chronicling without actually making direct narratives of the time and reality that we may be existing in. So though that may sound rather abstract and oblique, it is actually fact that, I say this often and I can't say it enough, that in some ways we're all like gardeners or farmers, where we have tracts of land that are the mental landscapes that we exist within. And we continuously find the most fertile, spaces that accommodate the kind of need-based crop, and so therefore idea of the time. As an artist, it's always been for me of relevance and importance to contextualize who I am. And so that comes from sort of not just the here and the now, but also the sort of ancestry that you place yourself within, both from the reality of what may be your actual spaces of belonging, that is your parents and the genealogy of your family, but also the other genealogy, which is a cultural context and a philosophical context and ideological one as well. And so you place yourself within these and you find where your pulse resonates the most in how you articulate the sense of who you are by understanding how you place yourself within your real world. So I am an Indian artist. I'm an Indian woman. I'm an Asian Indian woman. And so those things are obviously pin the tail on the donkey for me very precisely. I also come from a privileged background, have had the privilege of education. And so all of these things sew up a kind of probability and possibility to define what you do with your life and create the purposefulness from it. Art becomes one of those many things. I think that too often we sort of don't quite comprehend that the magnitude of being an artist is that it encompasses and takes in the entire world of your existence. So the entire world of one's existence is everything, whether you're, mother, a daughter, teacher, And so all of these things play a massive role in how your perception gets fashioned. So how do I begin a work of art? I think it's a process of excavating. You have your it's like going to your fridge and deciding what you have inside your fridge or what's inside your purse and what would buy you your meal or what would make you your meal. And so my art is my meal in the sense of it's the sustenance of who I am and what I would want to offer as sustenance to others. And so therefore, it is a process where you sit to discourse with yourself in the reality you find yourself in the age that you find yourself in the politics that you find yourself in. And you then find the kind of notations that will create that sense of meaning, and you put it out. And meaning is again not something that I wish to define as something that is describable. So, I happen to be a figurative artist, and I use that framework of language. But there may be somebody who is not, and I presume that they too would be having a similar methodology that allows them to frame the articulation, and offer it as a discourse of some sort.
So these are like probably two things. One is like, of course, you're talking about this garden and the farm, but there's also this, the forest inside you. I mean, what you were talking about, like those of surround sounds happening around us, and then they kind of interact and influence us, and then we kind of respond to it in our own ways. But the way we respond to it in our own ways makes it more probably special and exclusive, which probably makes you what you are. And so how do you harness that space and that forest, which kind of helps you, which helps configuring you in continuity? And, because you have had a kind of a really very long and interesting meandering journey as an artist, as an individual.
Again, I think it's really to do with what you do with your resources. For me, my resources have been very much my education and my life, the birth of being who I am, And I think that, there are many, I think that we all hold our political consciousness. I'm such an individual. I hold my political consciousness as a membrane. It's a membrane through which the osmosis of meaning is filtered, no? And so, but that is the membrane that I possess is one that has been decided and sort of selected by me. It is not just any membrane that filters. So therefore, what I choose to put on that membrane would be that selective process that comes from this space of who I am, where my birth has been, what my education has been, and what I've decided what my education will offer to me. I know that perhaps I disappoint many people by not, talking more in the framework of imagery. I find that to be a little bit superficial. I find that to be something that will not really define my intentions to another, and therefore in most discourses I always try to suggest to those who I'm talking to, and therefore I'm talking to a wider audience through you, that it is really not necessarily only the contours of what you are seeing as a figure or a motive, but it is what it evokes. And therefore, it is for an artist, I think, over a period of time, you sort of amalgamate and put together a kind of lexicon of meanings. You create personal dictionaries, sometimes to do with interpretations, sometimes to do with how you are decoding and how you are archiving, so to speak, meaning. And so all of this becomes the vocabulary that you then have at your command, so to speak, or you have with you, and it is that which you sift through, and which you quote unquote arrange to assemble new sentences of meaning. So just like the writer or the author or the teacher or the orator may use what we know to be a spoken and written language, we as artists use these other forms of language. But in the same way, we sort of arrange them into sort of semblances of delivery that allow you through your own personal experiences and journey as individuals to be able to sort of walk into the territory of meaning. Now, what do I mean by that, Nishitji? What I mean by that is that, take for example war. Take for example, ostracizing within society. So there are many things, take subjugation, take love, take family. There are many sort of areas of collective empathy and collective meaning, collective experience. So if I have to say to you in a conversation like this, that the horror of the Nazi regime, I don't need to say anything more, because we already have accumulated enough information, if we have been privileged to even basic education, what that actually comes to mean. And so therefore, when we're talking about how somebody brings their own cumulative experiences to discourse with what you're delivering to them, I do believe that they have the comprehension to be able to find the resonance, and enter into a personalized discourse that they choose to have with it. So we don't look at, for example, a photograph of human skeletal remains of the Nazi regime or the Pol Pot regime or Hiroshima or or Auschwitz. We don't look at those and we don't find it jubilantly celebratory. You'll have to have a very strange bent of mind to do that. And so you are taken into that space of evocation to understand, where you place your sorrow and where you place your empathy. And so I think that's what I'm really talking about, that as an artist, I think that is what I seek through my imagery and through my desire of creating personal languages, a language rather.
Yeah. So this languages again, I mean, as you call yourself as a feminist, and so I wanted to know more about that. What all has influenced you to become a feminist, and also
I was born into the DNA of a feminist womb that came from another feminist womb.
I'll come to feminism in India in the next question, but looking at the larger question of feminism, that to be born. I mean, I read about that. That you were born in a very cosmopolitan kind of upbringing and good education and all that. But then beyond it, I mean, I think it's also lots of people, I think, get those privileges in India. But then not everybody will kind of take a call that that person has to kind of get into one stream of idea or kind of a stream of thoughts. So what made you and what influenced you to get onto this form of belief or conviction?
I've said very often, and I will say it again, that I was brought up in this wonderful space of conversations from a very, very young age, to be heard, to be listened to, and to listen as well. And I think that in many ways, it sort of offers you a kind of backbone and a kind of spine to recognize that to really embrace the truth of what life is to accept that you have to hold accountability and responsibility. That has to go beyond just self-survival. So I think I kind of was brushed with that, like you put some seasoning on a nice dish. I was brushed with this from such a tiny age, and it sort of became, in many ways, logical to what would make up my lifescape. I think also art teaches you something that you can't really describe, especially if you have amazing teachers. And I think that's what I had. I had this wonderful spectrum of teachers who understood that teaching art was really not about skills alone. skills can be picked up very easily with determination and with being earnest. You can pick that up, but to be introduced into becoming a thinking individual and to understand that thinking is not has to have you hold the framework of your thinking where you can see it for yourself. It is not just simply to be waved under the noses of others. I think that is where what people like Subramaniam, Nasreen Mohammadi, Jyoti Bhatt, Peter de Francia, luminaries who gave to me, you know, a, a, a a person of very average intellect. I mean, we all go with the same basic education from schools. But what I think I sort of gathered into my basket of, discoveries was that I had to be accountable to myself. And art gave me those wonderful, openings to see, the chronicling of lives and histories and stories told that brought out the real understanding of what humanism is all about, because basically that's what life is. You have a short, we spoke on the telephone that day, which was such a wonderful interlude, given that we hadn't, actually ever met each other physically or, conversed ever before. And as I said, that, life is something to be embraced, and when somebody gives you the keys to open up your own world through education, then you can't throw those keys away. You just can't. You're obliged to find the correct lock and, take off the rust of the key and, see that you keep it well oiled, and that it actually will open up in many, one key can open up so many locks and so many things. And art does that, because within art you have philosophy, and within philosophy you have so many things that allow you to understand, cultural differences, to find compassion and empathy to things that you may never actually encounter. But they come to your doorstep through the curiosities you can garner, if you garner them, into these worlds that others have already gifted to you, And that could be through, wonderful literature or cinema. But I must say that my teachers, that's what they taught me. They taught me to be... to hold curiosity, not to just try to be this, finished product of an art school, because you never really learn very much. No, it's a process of trying every day.
So this is the other thing that, when we, at some point of time, we get on to, or somebody tells us that, okay, this is what you are, and this is where this kind of discovery of your own self, or your own elements in a very good way. So can you tell us about that? And when was there a decisive kind of a point or a phase where you realized that this is me, and this is what I always intended to be, and then what happened?
Nothing as exciting as that. I lived, as I said, very often on a very isolated Air Force base till, in my early childhood. Didn't go to school till I was 7 because of ill health, and had these amazing parents who sort of understood that the imaginative territory of a young growing child was really going to be the kind of wealth you could give to her. And so I was a child who did a lot of drawing as something that would hold my attention and focus. And so, yes, at a very young age, I think at the age of 5, I sort of recognized that it was something more than an occupational space. Because I said, and I say often that I stated that I would be a painter. I would be a painter. When I was 5 years old, that is what I was going to do. And my parents, said wonderful. Like if I had said I wanted to be a bus driver or something like that, so they were these wonderful, encouraging parents who said, of course, your dream and your proclamation is to be believed. And so I believed it, and I became this painter. So that was it. I think that maybe when I think in my own journey, and this is something that I'm not necessarily insisting that it's important for others to even know, but I think that at the age of 13, I became somebody who understood, I felt, I understood what life was going to be, because my father was going to wars and things like that. And I think that in some ways the kind of reality of your own childhood can often oblige you to find your maturity, which is not necessarily to do with the enactment of being grown up, but the maturity to understand that which you really can't comprehend, but you hold it. You hold it, and I think that I see that as a sort of touchstone of understanding that for me, I would always take life very seriously. So my family teases me that I don't have much of a sense of humor. That's true, I don't. I'm sort of this rather boring, serious, fuddy-duddy old lady. But then that's that's what holds my focus.
I think some of your work has like lots of humor. I mean, there's a kind of, you can sense that the painter is like very amused about, even painting that goat and around you, those small little things. So there is, I think, and you are so conscious and sensitive towards the surround thing, which they're like, they're small little things, which brings me to another question, that about seeing things which are like outside our focus. It's like what we call in light as penumbra. That there's a focus, and there is outside there's a luminous space. So you pick up loads of things from there, probably, and which is again it's a gift. It doesn't like happen to so many of us. So how do you process that? I mean, and that again is a kind of a being an observer kind of a person rather than actively participating into it. So there are lots of things that are happening around you, and then you're conscious of it, and then they get the kind of a play around in your work.
You're right. I mean, it's interesting because we've never met. So it's interesting that you make that observation about me. I'm somebody who's sort of a little bit hyper observant, and I sort of, I absorb it in ways where I'm not even realizing I'm doing it, but I'm a very visual individual. And I think that that's one thing. One of the things that is threaded onto what one would imagine you are sort of pointing out. For me, I think that, every day is one day less in your life. And so I think that I have cultivated a sense of intensity in relation to holding onto the idea that I need to make every day worthwhile in terms of what I do with it, why I'm placing myself in that time space. So obviously, one of the things that we take so much for granted, but one of the things that is so omnipresent is sight. You are seeing things, the flicker within the peripheral space of your glance, and if you store it, like a sort of recording. I have this habit of taking things out of my memory and examining it in strange ways. I don't sort of sit to say, okay, now I'm going to remember that. But for example, for years when I would travel by rickshaws, which were wonderful, beautiful, democratized spaces of travel, I would, if whatever space I was traveling every day, which would be the same thing that I would see, I would always find myself looking with this kind of intensity as though I was looking at it for the first time. And I understood that, in some ways, maybe it's part of what I learned from being a photographer, that, you can look at the world in ways where you pick and you select a frame and you freeze it. And in doing that, you don't necessarily make it more special than others. You're just archiving it because it came into your purview, and you then examine it later. So I think that in some ways, photography, because I did a lot of it, and I love the idea of looking through into the other, is something that maybe brought about this. In relation to my work, it is recently something that I am doing, which is to place multiple images that I have associations with, directly or obliquely. And so therefore it becomes like personalized museums, so to speak. I'm just using that word very loosely, where you kind of arrange everything that you're taking out of your head, but placing it within the connectives of how they will exist within that architectured space of thought that you construct, that you place the intention and you place this to underline the intention. So perhaps
it's like leaving a some kind of trace behind. That I'm going here, but then I'm leaving a trace here and there, like a bit of things which have happened in this interesting journey. About mentoring, you have talked about being mentored by very good art teachers in Baroda and in London. One thing which I wanted to ask was about how was London different from Baroda?
I went to England because I wanted, in some ways, a distance away from India at the time for me to perceive India better.
Yeah.
And I don't mean India in a sort of, political thing that I was doing some research, but because all that I am is from the ethos of being from this cultural territory. That was one thing. The second thing, and perhaps the more important thing, was that I was very, I had exhausted what the college could give to me. But in no way do I want to sound arrogant or, state that I was such a great student that there was nothing for me to learn. But I'm talking about a sort of ethos of time, because it was a very interesting and very fecund time of, art practices with wonderful contemporary artists who are also teaching there. But some of the preoccupations were not necessarily the ones that I was engaged with. And so gender and gender politics was something that was sort of so absent in the interest of others. And there was a sort of prevailing socialist Marxist kind of investigation, or that became the premise by which a lot of the political spaces were engaged with. And then we were also in a very exciting time of restructuring or finding, structuring discourses about new language, So narrative traditions, looking at how the indigenous and the folk and the tribal vernacular factors were something that were significant to be engaged with. And we were looking and examining, sort of the problems of being part of colonial history. So all of that was very exciting. But I felt that there was something that I needed to kind of step away from in order for me to know that, I was going to engage with something from a position and a premise that made more sense to me than being part of a certain set of inquiries, exciting as they were, but they were not necessarily the right fit for me. And maybe I was, the child of that era. So I, in many ways, just sort of absorbed it because that's what children do. You're gifted these things by those older to you. So in many ways, these territories of inquiry became something that I could take for granted. In some ways, that's a wonderful thing that education allows you to have. So going to London for me, and being economically, sort of well taken care of on a very well paid scholarship, allowed me to take the sense of time, where I could examine and engage with myself with a distance from myself. So myself, India, all becomes synonymous with this, with this idea of examining. I've always been a bit feisty. That's part of who I am, and it's a choice I make. And so I'm not somebody who's easily, I'm not somebody who goes and lays myself down at the altar of, submission. And so I entered the Royal College of Art and, engaged with some wonderful teachers and obliged them that they would have to take me, engage with me on my terms. Now, why I'm saying that is that very often when I had witnessed this with some other contemporaries of mine who were studying there at the same time, and there before me as well, there is a tendency that and especially in those days we were considered third world. So I used to sort of flaunt this as a kind of abuse sometimes, like if I didn't like a space that I was given, I'd say, is this a third world space you're giving me? And I'm like, no, I'll get shifted up. Anyway, on a less jocular note. So I had chosen to study under Peter de Francia because he was well versed with the contemporaneity of, India, and not the classical traditions alone. And so I wanted to have discourses with somebody in this space that was very precious for me, because time was very important for me, to be able to have it where I did not have to explain everything. And so what I always say to people who ask me this, ask me about London, I went like a good traveler. I took some luggage with me. I didn't go, waiting to be given the charity of new clothes to wear. I took my luggage with me because I already was, a mature student. And I understood that I had learned something that I had wanted to learn. And I wanted to now expand, even if it was to throw it away. But that choice would be mine. I would have something to throw away, And so I think that it was a very important time in my life for me. I have always been very disciplined in terms of time. And so I did a 3-year course in 2 years. I did something like 200 paintings that were, many of which are now in with people who care for them. Let's not go beyond that. I'm not interested in collections and all of this sort of stuff. That's not the point of this conversation. But I think that if your work is received by someone, that means it holds something to be taken seriously, and therefore I mention it. And so it was, I wrote a thesis. I really used every moment of my time. I traveled for 4 months, over the 2 years. And yes, it was a very exciting time to issue to myself my own identity card. I could issue to myself the formulation of an identity that had been, all that while sort of gestating and readying itself to then, be held with more clarity.
And what was your experience with Nasreen Mohammadi? And She was
Nasreen,
somebody like you who came, who went there maybe some years before you, and then she made that London her place, and then.
Nasreen, no. Nasreen Mohammed was my teacher in Baroda.
Oh,
And
not in.
no, no, no. She was my teacher in Baroda, and she was actually handpicked to be a faculty member by Subramaniam. And so it was interesting because Subramaniam, as we know him, and Nasreen Mohammadi, as we know her, sort of like chalk and cheese. But how amazing, because both, held the spectrum of the most wondrous, avant-garde, new, uh, you know, well understood ideas about what contemporary Indian art was all about. And they came from different sort of trajectories of learning, but held such a lot of similar wisdom. So yes, Nasreen was my teacher in India, very strict. She's been a teacher to many. I was no favorite of anybody's, but she has impacted, me. I carry her legacy as precious because she gifted me a teaching that I think I should never ever, uh, I should never squander.
And what was that? What teaching is that?
I think that she taught me, that if you could do X, then do Y. If you could do Y, then do Z. So I mean, I've had many instances. I remember going to college with stitches in my stomach. We don't need to go into the whys and whats of why those stitches were there. And I was working, and my stitches burst, and my dress was sort of full of blood. But to me, it didn't matter. It was a question of, I took those things sort of, just on my chin, because the kind of rigor of learning that I could see was being offered, and the kind of expectations that people like Jyoti Bhatt and Nasreen Mohammadi held for me, uh, uh, was allowed me to understand that you have to push yourself, sometimes even physically, in order to be able to transcend the sort of these spaces of your vulnerabilities, and really maximize how you use your time. Because I have often, in my early years as a student, and even as a young artist, I would live by a timer. I would I would put my timer for 60 minutes, and then I would be reading something. And then if my time, after, that hour went off, then I would go and I would, complete something else. I'm also a mother. I have a 42-year-old son who was not a child by accident. He's very, I decided to have a child early in my life because I had some health issues when I made the decision to conceive. And so I'm a hands-on everything. And so, you have to grapple with life, and come up, not just a survivor, but really standing tall. And so I think that this is what I actually learned from people like Nasreen. I don't want to descriptively talk about the time when she passed away, but she had a very difficult ending to her life, and she never compromised. She actually worked in the most difficult of situations. And her work was such where the smallest of mistake could not, get rectified. So what are we next to those kind of examples? Nothing. So we learned a lot, and I think that the only way that you really carry forth anybody's legacy, if you believe that there is a legacy to carry forth, is to live the principles that they, so generously allowed you to see. So
One thing I wanted to ask about, you're also a mentor to some young artists, and You have been a teacher yourself, so how do you see mentoring for young Indian artists these days? And being a feminist, I mean, that's the next question, which I mean, you're going to be asked that. Uh, what do you tell these young girls who are, getting into art now, in these years and trying to make some kind of a place or find their own form or find their own journeys?
I remember telling you on the phone, the word mentorship for me doesn't apply. I'm not anybody's mentor. But I thank you for generously believing that I may be.
To be a friend, guide, and philosopher, then, maybe not like mentor.
I've just been a teacher and a very kick-ass teacher. So yes, I have taught for many years, and I chose to teach in non-institutionalized ways without charging any money and not making the Collective Studio Boda a registered NGO or anything, so we don't get any tax benefits or anything. At the end of the day, I have this very simple philosophy that in a country like India, we don't have, at least certainly not now and not even before these few institutions, private institutions that have come up, we have not had enough, art institutions in our country. That's point one. Point two is I don't believe that art, the curriculum of art begins and ends from 8 o'clock in the morning till 12 in the afternoon. I think it's something that has to be, integrated into your life in a way where there are people around you who believe that it is a 24/7, 365 days till the number of years that you live. And so I began to see that there wasn't the sort of same rigors of teaching, and we've had wonderful teachers till today in colleges, but not the institutions themselves, with the politics that exists in educational spaces, the interference from political parties, all of this has certainly encroached into the kind of quality of education. And for whatever reasons, let's not get into that, I have felt that there is more and more of a need for people to be able to find proper belief. I'm somebody who loves the fact that there's a good pulsating art market. So money and art, forget about it, it's not a big issue. But what I do feel is that, you can't believe that you're ready to be this, high-priced, high-selling, whatever, when you are, in a premise of learning. And that learning can extend for many, many years. So I think there's a certain humility with which one must have sort of a self-critique. All of these things combined with the fact that I found that many people desperately needed, as I said, to be believed in and to be heard. And so that's what really started it off. And, I laugh and say a little bit that I'm somebody where people come to me, and my partner Surendran always says, please don't listen to the story, because I hear a story and then Surendran will come home and somebody's living with us and something is, and it's just the way it is. But I think there's something about this simple act of faith and belief. It's a transaction you can't really explain. People ask me, and recently I've been asked this question a number of times, have I been disappointed with some of the people I have engaged with? Of course that happens, But in the larger picture of placing one's purposefulness, what does it matter if somebody exploited you a little bit, or somebody, thought that they could get something from you which was not really the agenda of you? It's okay. We're not sitting here as judge and jury. You let things go. It teaches you, and I think that in some ways it allows you to realize more sharply what you need to do, so you don't get sidetracked. But I'm a very, very, very tough teacher. So we'll have many people perhaps.
What will it amounts to? What kind of, kitna murga banati hain aise? my strict headmasters used to do that, when I was growing up in Chhattisgarh and small places. So my idea of a tough teacher is that they will kind of, were like exacting, you might be thinking, but I think is like they're like punishing kind of teachers. So,
Well, for me, it's
but I
very
think what
simple.
we really mean is like being, being a bit of a provocative and like kind of trying to bring.
Very exacting. I'm very exacting of your time because I'm giving you my time and I'm not taking any money for it. And, so let's be very clear about something. First of all, I can't make you an artist. That's not something I can do. What I can do is I can believe in you. I don't care where you come from, whether you're rich, poor, whatever. I'm not interested. What I'm interested in is, are you a believer in yourself? Do you really, really desire to be something? I have had kids who have been with me for 5 and 6 years and then completely changed and become designers or something. And I've said, fine, I've stood up for them with their parents and whatever and said, listen, an education does not have to take you to this canvas and paper and print and exhibition. It takes you somewhere. And so if this individual wants to be a designer, wants to be an animator, all of this is going to serve that person very well. So honor it, honor it. It's okay. You've had somebody like Arundhati Roy, learning architecture, becoming a filmmaker, and then becoming one of India's most eloquent writers. It's okay. It's her journey. She believed in it. And so you have to believe in other people. And I'm not here to, as I said, make somebody into anything. If somebody comes to me because they want to have a place where they can find instances to be able to, excavate, to engage, our library is open for them. We used to have studio spaces for them till recently. Fine. You're welcome to come in if you don't have other opportunities available to you. But then you have to work according to what I believe is to be the timetable of your time. And then I'm not interested in all these, romance stories, and because I don't have time for all of that. So are you ready to pledge yourself to 5 years or 4 years or 3 years or whatever it is, to just really put your heart and soul? So it's a kind of dedication, you dedicate yourself to this, that will, you don't look to see what the reward will be. You dedicate yourself and it will give you something if you are honest with yourself. So don't be honest with me, be honest with yourself, So I, for years have worked strange hours. And so I would go and take a round at 3 in the morning, or 4 in the morning, because I'm painting at that time, or I've opened my studio and, you can come and work in my studio as well. But if I see you dozing off,
So what's your daily routine these days? Like, in this, through this, and also especially because of COVID years, so how did it change anything, or it remain the way you work and the way you live?
I just want to say one more thing in relation to the way we approached our teaching and we approach our teaching. One of the things that we're very clear about is that we always want that the individuals maximize how they can find, information in terms of opening up their scholarship. So reading programs, watching really good films, art history, political history, these are all part of the things that are obligatory if you are going to be, part of any learning program. So there is a rigor that we put in, and it's not anything prescriptive. We don't have some syllabus or something. We try to tailor make it to where every individual. We also believe that the individual must be very healthy. So certain ways of living, exercise, things like that. We also open up our entire world so if tomorrow you had to come and visit me, well, you'll be meeting whoever was there at that time with the same sense of importance. They are equally important. So that I just wanted to say, because though I make light of the fact that, because I don't really like the big halos that people want to place for what they do. Since we're talking to a larger audience, I do want to place out that the Collective Studio Baroda does many things, but the most important thing has been to offer faith and belief to individuals. To get
I
back to
think
what
that
we
is the most important part. Like, I think everybody, even when you must be growing up, or the best, I think, teachers, to my mind, in my own experience, I think they were the one who kind of believed in uh, the questioning, and sometimes they were like not conforming to the way that the templates we were given. So, and the other thing was that the kind of attention and reassurance you get from them, and how they kind of encourage you, and they bring that kind of bit of an exclusivity within you. That one, I think this is the best thing which we get from our, uh, if not mentors, like friend guides and philosophers, right?
Absolutely. So, to get back to your earlier question that I sort of rudely interrupted with this other discourse I was having, COVID hasn't really been any different for me within my studio practice. Has it been different for us? Of course. I mean, I think to witness what has been happening in India, the world over, but my concern is India. And I think that I would have to sort of say, before I talk about it from my personal perspective, that I'm deeply saddened by the leadership of my country. I'm deeply saddened that my leaders, my elected leaders, have not had the conviction to lead by example, to put out things with as parliamentary, mandates, to be able to curtail the these sort of strange needs we seem to have for political rallies, for any religious, it can be any religious or cultural festival, if they're, across the board. All of this should have just been, packaged off. You have children who have not been able to go to school. You're having board exams that have been cancelled. And you're having huge political rallies. You're having people jumping into holy rivers. And then you have the discourses of people trying to convince, citizens of the country that this is not something that is curtailable. I find this problematic. And I also find it sort of farcical that people are putting things like curfews into place only after and when it suits their political, need. So I'm deeply, deeply disturbed by this. To get back to what is COVID for me as an individual, I must say that again, I have to say that I am deeply privileged to be in an economic situation that allows me the knowledge that I can be safe, hopefully, if anything does occur. In relation to how COVID has been for me as an artist, as I said, it hasn't really changed my studio practice. I have been working as I do. I'm a bit of a mole in a hole, I
So how is your
don't.
daily routine? I mean, like, from getting what time you get up to like what time you go to sleep? Because that's something which I was asking. That, how is your
Okay. How just is my day like?
daily life? Yeah.
My day is like any other day, except that, there were certain things that I used to enjoy doing. Once in a while, I would go to a cafe and have some coffee with some of my young artist friends or things like that, which today I'm a little bit skeptical of doing. But I get up in the morning. I think the one thing that I have changed in my routine is I have stopped working till 4 and 5 in the morning, because I have a slightly, impacted immune system. And so I did not want to run the risk of falling ill. But otherwise, my work day can exist up to 12 o'clock every night. I take some time off for family. My partner is also an artist. Surendran comes back, and then we sit together for an hour or two and have our meal together. We have a young, very wonderful artist within the collective studio, Boda. His name is Ankush Safaya. He cohabitates with us. He resides in our home with us. And so we try to create some kind of a space where he has time with us to, engage in his world of ideation. We have another collective studio, Boda associate, Endivya, she's a young artist. She often is with us. So we have these pockets of, interaction. And over the period of the pandemic, except when there was the lockdown, we have attempted to, as artists, interact responsibly with a few other artists who are very close to us, in order to keep that balance of a new normal. That you do it. We're fortunate to have a large space, as our home, and so you can keep that physical distance that allows safety. And yes, but I'm everything revolves around my work. But I'm somebody who is disciplined in everything. So my home is well kept, and I think any sensible individual would do that, man or woman. I also want to talk slightly about the fact that as a feminist, I don't see feminism, and I'm sure you would agree with that as well. I don't see it as the prerogative of something associated only for women. So when you ask me about female students, I think it's gender is something, the gender politics and the correct mindset towards how we deal with gender equality is something that needs to be a societal positioning of every individual. And one has to be respectful to the premises of difference. I brought up a male child, and I think that he's 6 feet 4 inches tall, and he has huge muscles. So, but that does not make him a chauvinist. So, what you gift to your to everyone, and especially to your male.
Absolutely.
The male gender is a different gaze, and an idea that misogyny and entitlement of being male, or the idea that because you're male you're entitled, is one that needs to be put to rest. But here again, I would say, much to the, I'm sure I will get myself into a lot of trouble, I think that our political will is not there to create a shift in mindset towards how we address gender issues. We are still in the stage in our country where we think that having a male child is what will give us more grace and entry into family status. We still have abortions happening and female infanticide occurring. We still have dowry death. I mean, the list is long. We have many things that degrade the dignity of a female existence. So, in relation to how I deal with my female students, is I walk a very tight rope, because I care a lot for their safety, and you can't really change the world. But what I do care most about is that they understand that they're equal to all. I don't think that I teach my female students any differently than I would teach my male students. What I think today we have is that we have a far greater history, contemporary history of female, feminist endeavor. And once again, I will say that there are lessons of feminist examples that cross all economic spaces. So this is not just something
more of cultural, societal.
Absolutely. Right. So it's not just something to pick out of a library and read about, but to also recognize its existence in the rural belts of India, in the places where the anonymous women have really outdone us with their courage and conviction to live their lives with their feminist space, with their femininity as their birthright.
One thing which I was asking wanted to ask you was, what if Rekha ji meets 20-year-old Rekha now for a coffee, as you were talking about, and so and they meet for 1 hour. So what will that conversation be all about?
I think that I would see perhaps in that young individual the possibility of somebody who would be able to grapple with life uh, um, without compromise, and to hold it, that her integrity to her reality. Because if I was 20 years old today, I would of course be gifted with a lot more access to certain spaces that would allow me a different journey of independence and of affirmative, living within my philosophical space. One of the things that I love to see are women and how they dress today. So forget the aesthetics. The aesthetics can be quite ghastly from time to time, but I love these, ladies who will be like wearing their tight t-shirts and their, tight tights, and they just own this space of believing that this is who I want to be, and this is what I will be. And I think that those are small examples of people understanding that they are going to be comfortable with who they are, and that in the definition of what their domain is, they will make the decisions about their representation and their identities. And so that really, I mean, I can, like, oh my God, terrible aesthetics, that's fine, you can have a giggle over that. But at the end of the day, I'm so proud to see that. I'm so proud. It just makes my heart go, yeah, it's an assertion of identity,
And one last question. I think we're just finishing it. We're over an hour now. One thing about this whole, the way, if you have like a bird's eye view of the Indian art right now uh, compared to what is happening globally. I mean, the way we see people like IYY, people coming from probably Middle East. I mean, so people like far more disruptive. And when I was looking at also Black Lives painting happening in US. How do you see this the way are we able to make undo healthy or vocal politics and statesmanship of through art, talking and enhancing our own conversations in society?
That's a very interesting question you place. I think that I'm going to start it from a slightly oblique way. I think that it's an interesting thing that despite the problems that we face in India today, because we do face problems in India, I think that we're seeing a kind of regime and conservative, pull way away from what the initial constitutional normative ideas ever were meant to be. But having said that, and we don't really have free press, and we don't have many of these things that we took once for granted. When I was in my 30s and 40s, we took these things very much for granted, the ideas of what a secular nation really was. But I still have to say that maybe because the country is so huge and we are always in some chaos or the other, that we somehow manage to get away with things, and maybe it escapes the focus of individuals, or maybe they're not even that astute to understand when commentary or when critique is really being presented. But has there been a clampdown over the last 10 years? I think that what is frightening to see is that we have had a lessening of the kind of spirited positioning of dissent, especially through the arts or cinema, because there is such a kind of moral vigilantism that has taken root and which is then supported by the popular voice, which has become the most dangerous thing that we see today. I mean, just recently, I mean, forget what the truth of that story was about Riya Chakrabarti and that poor gentleman Nishant, the actor. Sushant, the actor. I mean, what we did was something that was so criminal in the manner in which we voyeuristically enjoyed completely devouring and assassinating an individual in ways that, you wouldn't do to something that is inanimate. You'd throw it away with more respect. And so I'm seeing this increasingly. So has it impacted the art world? I do think so. And I think that we don't really have artists' voices that are able to stringently address these political issues, because perhaps it may not necessarily also be part of the territory of their concerns. Having said that, I'm living with an artist, Surendran Nair, whose work is always very obliquely referencing certain critiques. So, we both have stood to being, attacked through censorship, him in different ways and me in different ways. But I think that today, maybe governments are not that interested in the cultural territory because they've already silenced it quite a lot. And so we don't really have sort of spaces. We don't have alternative spaces that will do things that can accommodate and that will encourage, things that are related to any form of dissent, because we will immediately start off with saying that this religious faction has been offended and that political party is being attacked, and so we'll end up managing to find legal ways by which to bring such pressure. Let us just look at this poor girl who in Bangalore got arrested. So when we talk about the imaginative landscape of an individual, we are not necessarily talking about imagination as a creative device that manifests itself only in painting and sculpture and whatever. But the imaginative landscape of any individual to think and to bring about the hope of change. And in issues related to things like climate, what are we going to do if we are going to completely suppress the voice of such youth and such forms of expression? So yes, I think you're quite right in pointing out that we don't have those types of artists whose art represents that, and we also don't have systems that would protect us. So you get into these long legal wrangles and our judicial systems are such where you are jumping from one court to another. So I think that it's been a very clever device by the political factions that hold power in our country to make certain that we toe the line. And so, yes.
But shouldn't it be like this is also like a probably challenge, and then we have seen it like in literature and in art and in poetry, films basically. I mean, look at the movies which come from Iran and look at the art which comes from China, Czech Republic, when they used to have one after the all the Nobel laureates were coming from Czechoslovakia because of all the suppression happening there. So, do you think that we are not being suppressed enough to come up with our best forms of art and articulation?
That's what I said. That in some strange way, everything goes. Everything
should we wait and should we still hibernate to come up with our best sentences and best paintings and best poetry to deal with this?
I know you say it with amusement, but I know that there is also the serious undertone to this. Somewhere I believe that, if you look at the world over, and then of course India within this, we are all taking ourselves to some strange brink of disaster, and I'm an atheist. I'm not religious. I'm not talking from any sort of spiritual connotation. But if you just look at the manner in which we treat in human beings, and we treat the planet, we treat, resources, anything, the idea that things are just going to be there only for us for as long as we need it, and we don't need to bother about anything else. I think we are going to have to be obliged to face true crises much more than we're facing even now in the pandemic, which is a horrible thing to say, before we recognize and understand, what do we need to do to stand up and be counted. Because I have seen, as I said, I'm 62 years old, and I have seen this is not the India that I believed I was working towards. So there are many disappointments I hold about my India. I live here by political choice. So I have the right to hold a critique about it, And the moment you openly, articulate your critique, you are seen as anti-national. And I think this is something that is the greatest folly that is being allowed to, that is being fanned, that unless you show how grateful you are to everything that exists within this territory, you will be deemed as being somebody who is an anti-national. No, of course not. I will chastise my son even at the age of 42 because he's my kid. I'm not going to look at for my neighbor's child to chastise him or her and say, it's okay, chalta hai beta, you do whatever you want to do. It's within my background and within my playground, within my backyard, that I need to address my issue. So India is my issue, and we all should recognize that healthy critique and dissent should not be seen as a violation of sort of constitutional norms. It should be seen that it is something that is upheld as being healthy for a democracy, and a constitution that should function correctly within a democracy like ours has all these spaces for it. It's the manner in which it's being interpreted today that is stitching the mouths of all of us. So yes, you're right. We do have a lot of things within our country that allows us the freedoms that maybe many others don't have. But having said that, why is it that critique is something that is seen with such negativity? And I think that India, as it progresses, after all these many years of independence, should be able to pull up her socks, and get it right.
So the last question would be that, where do you draw your hopes from, Rekha, when you're talking about such times and difficulties and this and that? There's one very, very interesting statistics, which is the median age of India is 28. So half of India is 28 and below. Which I draw lots of hopes from this whole raw bundle of energy, like which will probably deal with all of this, because they would not be looking so much at the past and the roots we have. Then they will be much more bothered about the future, and that is there's another divide between every other divide, like caste and gender and communities and all that. So where do you see, where do you get your hopes from?
I would just address this idea of the youth to start off with, and before I talk about where I take my hope from. I have, I'm a diehard optimist. So yes, I oblige myself to hold hope every day. Otherwise, there would be no I would see little reason to live. Where do I draw my hope from? I draw my hope from the hope that the realization in my country is that, after these many years of independence, we are still not addressing issues to do with people who have been so marginalized. So I draw my hope on a daily basis that better sense will prevail, and that hopefully contributions of the tiniest possible way will add to the pool of purposefulness and positivity. But that's apart. When we talk about the youth of any space, and if we're certainly talking about the youth of our country, yes, it is something that I'm a firm believer that, the future lies in their hands. But, on the other hand, when I'm looking at the manner in which you find people so single focused onto their little mobile phones and, screens and playing these strange games and whatever else, I am the first person I'm one of the people who would say that, wow, look what gift technology is, in terms of what it has done for science and development of so many things. It's just a phenomenal thing for medicine, for science, and, education, all of these things. But when it's come down to the individual and how the individual develops themselves, I think, it is the saddest thing to see how we are abusing technology and creating sort of, zombified people whose only concern is to entertain themselves. And I think that this is something that we are pretending doesn't exist. We are pretending that it's okay. They're going to become responsible people. They're going to understand how to, navigate this. But I don't see it. I don't see it at all. So when you have people, videoing rape and circulating it, when you have, those kind of, horrors being perpetuated through this entertainment, where I think we have to really sit back and wonder what the hell we are doing. Now, one last thing I would say is that no future is ever absent and cannot really be formulated unless you have a very good comprehension of what your past has been. And so therefore history, in every sense of the word, has to be something that is known and understood and then positioned with. You have to take a position to know where you align yourself to this, to the lineage of where you come from, where your country is placed within those lineages as well. For many years when we were young, artists would be looked at as derivative of the West. And, we've gone through all these sort of strange assumptions. And we've taken positions on those and we have created new histories. And so therefore it is very important for any young individual to be taught the value of recognizing the importance of knowing your history and then what you do with it in order to be able to imagine or envisage a future.
True. So thank you so much. It was like such a delight and long conversation, like with meandering, and I think our young and old art lovers of Veer Koti will love it as much as I did talking to Rekha Rodwittiya. Thank you so much.
Thank you.